Yes, Pat? Yeah.
It seems like the meditation that we did today, where you notice your mind, you know, chattering away, and then you just watch it. You're not buying into it. It feels a lot like shamatha with an object in a way, because what I notice is when I'm attached to whatever it is that my mind's thinking about, and so I'm constantly letting it go. So, and then when you have an object, and your mind wanders, you're bringing it back to the object. So how is that any different?
That's a good question. There are a number of differences. One is that in the case of just resting the awareness on the stream of consciousness unfolding, you're not actually applying an antidote when you're distracted. So ideally, if you're engaging in the practice and you kind of have a sense of what you're doing, you understand that there's no antidote necessary. The mental stream is just unfolding, and you're just witnessing it. Not even, placing your awareness on it like you would on the cup if that was your thing, but rather that you just see it happening. And there's another piece of it which is relevant also, and that's the so the waves of subtle and coarse thoughts calm down in their own ground. They calm down in their own ground for a number of ways you could say it. One is they never left the ground, like it never leaves the ground. And so it actually doesn't, how to go back to this, calm down is a little funny. But anyway, it doesn't calm down from one place to another. And I think it can get confusing because it can feel like there's a number of things going on here, which you brought up, that there's the mental content which is unfolding, and I'm putting my awareness on it, which fundamentally means, the mistake here fundamentally means that you are putting your awareness on one thing after another, not on the stream that's unfolding.
Okay.
So if you find that your awareness is first you remember something and let's say you're angry, so you put your awareness on the anger. Then what actually happens is that does dissolve back into the ground, but then there's something else, and so you put your awareness on that thing. So it's one object after another that you're putting your awareness on. I think we all do that when we do this practice in the beginning. But the idea here is not to bring your awareness to each of those objects, but to see how the things fold back into the ground.
So you're not consciously letting go of anything, you are just kind of letting it run its course?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would say it's not bad. But the difference is that you're not letting it run the course in the sense that we always let it run the course. That is to say, I'm always agitated by the content of my mind, and so I must be doing it right because I'm agitated as hell. So therefore,
I'm aware I'm agitated.
yeah, it's really not. The idea here is that everybody can witness, especially when there's something really difficult, like had an argument with somebody and it's really bugging me. But what you know is, as long as you are trying to fix that, or trying to develop a better argument that will convince somebody of something, as long as you're working it like that, with the idea that this is how I'll get rid of it, we all know it doesn't work. It doesn't get rid of it. So the idea here is not to get rid of anything, but to discover that if I don't push it, or try and stop it, or do something with it, try to manipulate it, in broad terms, it will disappear. It will just dissolve. And that's more fundamentally the point than the individual things that arise as objects that we might put our awareness on. But it's hard. It's more difficult. Easy to understand, right?
So many, it seems like to me, so many of the basic instructions, like that clinging and aversion create disturbance as suffering, and the urgings to accept what is and to love what is.
It's worse.
It all ties into this of being the witness, because the more you try to get into that stream and question it or push it away or try to change it, try to manipulate it, the more disturbed that stream becomes.
Yeah.
So being in the witness state seems to be what all these things are pointing to avoid disturbing the stream.
Yeah. I think it's a witness at my own proclivity in this. So there's a lot of similar teachings on this. This is not unique, but I just pulled the calm abiding peace out of the Mahamudra aspiration prayer and thought, well, we'll just see, this is a really nice authoritative few lines here, so let's see where that goes. But I think that the draw is that it's actually not difficult to understand. So conceptually, when you hear it, you can have an easy aha, yeah, that makes sense. And then when you contemplate it, that can make sense. But when you sit down to do it, then I think Pat's experience also becomes like, phew, I got a piece of anger, I got a desire, I have a jealousy, I've got this thing going on, that thing going on. Damn, I forgot my appointment tomorrow afternoon. It's like just one thing after another. And so it can become totally busy. Like your awareness is going there, and then it's going there, and it's like a sideshow at a circus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Things popping up and you're throwing things at them. Throwing things at them doesn't work. Here, ideally, it's the whole experience that whether you don't need to figure out a way for it to dissolve back into the ground. You couldn't stop it from doing that. So the idea is, can you sit still and just watch it happen? Because if you get good at that, now you really have something.
Okay.
Okay, so I was thinking of this river as the river of loving kindness flowing into the still ocean of shamatha. And it's loving kindness because it carries everything. It doesn't discriminate. So I'm wondering, in the world, the reason we have so much strife is because there's so much discrimination, so much judgment. I'm going to do this. I disagree with you. I'm going to, and it goes on and on. Just like in our minds. So does that mean that in the world, if we're practicing, we shouldn't take sides?
You know the answer to that, don't you?
No, I'm really struggling with this.
Really?
Sometimes I think I do, sometimes I think I do, and it's a different answer.
Yeah, cool, of course. Yeah. it's a different practice. So let's divide the two into their respective pieces. One is we have a practice here, this calm abiding practice. This calm abiding practice, in essence, is a practice of no agenda. That's essentially it. So you're right to raise that question. Well, what about skillful means in the world? Activities, actions, speech, all these things that we use to benefit others and hurt others, depending on which way we're wielding the sword. But the idea here with the practice is no agenda. What arises, arises. There's nothing in that says you shouldn't do anything in the world. You shouldn't, because the extension of that is you shouldn't help anybody who needs help,
Yeah, right.
right? You shouldn't do anything. I'm not sure what that looks like. I feel personally that it's an impossible standard to meet, and when I contemplate it, I can't find why I would want to meet it. So that should not be the case in this example. I think we should be able to contemplate the practice and come to a clear conclusion that I would like to be able to do that. But see, there's no moral injunction in that practice. What flows down the river flows down the river. I'm not there to clean the river up. I'm not engaged in any kind of ecology of anything in it, really. I'm just watching. I think this goes back actually to an image that I've always liked. In many paintings, ancient paintings, there's a sage sitting by a river. And it's such a common image, like spiritually. And I tend to associate it with exactly this practice. Like you're just watching it go by. The river is just the metaphor for the flow of the mind. And just like the mind, the river is absorbed back into the ground. It may evaporate and come, all sorts of things that at some point may actually not be in accordance with what we're doing. But generally speaking, it's a pretty good metaphor. You're not doing anything with it, but you are aware of what's happening. So I think we could also make a case once we get up from our seat, and then the issue is, so how do I help myself and others in this world? Then I think a case can be made that having developed the ability to abandon agendas, you are in a better position to give rise to a skillful one when it's necessary. But mostly all we have is agendas, just continuously. And they do battle with each other, it's like there are warriors, we send them out and they do battle and come back and report whether you lost that one. and then we say, next time kill them. It's like not quite,
Take no prisoners.
it's not quite untrue. It's like, yes, that happens, next time kill them, and you can see how it goes. So I think more could be done. There's, the teaching on this is part of the Mahamudra system. It's also part of the Dzogchen system. This business of putting the mind on the mind stream and not trying to fiddle with it, but becoming like very clear and present with it is I think a piece of all a piece. I don't want to say that it really is that, but it's a piece of all of the really advanced teachings on advanced meditations. You have to be able to just see and let it be.
Well, that's the position I've taken. Then, there's always arguments against it from other quarters, It just always happens like that. And that's what's in that mind stream, all of it. And so, so like you're saying, have to maintain that equanimity in the midst of action.
This is like a practice of equanimity of experience, like
Mhm.
whatever experience arises, I work with that. And I think that there's the three wisdoms are also helpful in understanding it. Because you're right, there's nothing that cannot be conceptually undermined
Yeah.
or built up. But one of the advantages of dividing the pieces of the approach into the three wisdoms is the first one allows you to have all the conceptual stuff you want. You work through that, at least to some degree, and then the issue of contemplation comes, which I always have to say, most people appear to be quite good at the conceptual and not too bad at the meditation, but terrible at the contemplation, which is actually the middle one. I think that's largely our culture also. You can go to college and get 3 PhDs and never get any instruction in contemplation. You might even attend meditation classes, but contemplation is likely to not even be there. And the contemplation piece is important because that's where you actually personalize it. You know, once you're in the meditation, the personalization is finished. It's like you're doing it. You built the boat, you're out in the middle of the ocean. Contemplating what went wrong is probably not helpful. And so I think that those three wisdoms are a great prescription for how to approach these different meditations, because we want to bring all of it in the end to experience, because in the end it's the only thing that matters. Okay, so
The contemplation is the bridge,
yeah, it's the bridge, yeah.
and we can understand things up to a certain point because we're good at understanding certain kinds of things, but the kinds of things that we're setting the ground for here are kinds of things that we don't understand yet. So it actually takes some work to really sort it out and try the meditation and then see how did that relate to what we were learning and studying, and then really think about it, and then in that active contemplation, can actually open into moments of meditation when you go, oh, I could look this way, and then it's more informed. But there was one thing that you said about then we have to sustain equanimity, and there is something, and the word that Michael used was cultivate equanimity. And there's something in the way that we often talk about this where it's kind of like the right way to do it. And it was almost implied in the way that you asked the question at the beginning, should I do it this way or should I do it that way? As though one of them would be kind of the correct way. And some of it is more, it's just really more a matter of trying and failing over and over again to test it out.
Yeah.
That's what cultivation actually looks like that.
Yeah.
So it requires a kind of courage and also a great deal of humility and honesty to work in that space where we won't have the kind of moral certainty. I've got the right way nailed. This is really a clear case where contemplation really helps to kind of review and check. But understanding what it is that we're cultivating, how would I take the next step in sort of opening my equanimity? What would be the thing that I could do today in that? That's a more effective thing in the long run.
Well, what I've come to is taking a position and meeting opposition. That what I need to hold on to is the aspiration for loving kindness, to cultivate loving kindness in every situation. What my response is, you know, so that's gives me a guideline, and you know, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't seem to work, and there's where the experimentation is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All cultivation requires a good experiment.
Yeah. Suvanshu?
So it's a little, the question is slightly long, but it'll get to the practice that we did today. So this year, Lama Michael, I exposed myself to you know, the Abhidhamma teachings, and one came from Bhikkhu Bodhi, who is a Theravada monk. Okay, and he has, you know, he talked about he's written a compendium on the Abhidhamma. Now, and then the other exposure I had was Alan Wallace himself. You know, through Geshe Rapton, he taught on consciousness. In both of the teachings, what's interesting is that there are teachings on the mental factors, the 52 mental factors. I'm sure you've heard of this, right? So these
I
are
live in them.
He's living in.
So now this is in contrast to the simplicity of what you talked about, you know, today. But anyway, the point is that these are mental factors that arise in, they say, every moment of consciousness, and the moments of consciousness are either wholesome or unwholesome. Now, where I'm going with this is that when you do the practice of watching the river of emotion or river of consciousness, and actually the way that Alan taught it many years ago, a decade ago I think, is he said don't look at the all 6 consciousnesses, you know, remove the 5 and only look at the mind and the mental objects. So he called it settling the mind in its natural state, which I think it's a Dzogchen practice. Now, so today when you were teaching it, right, when I do the practice, what I notice is that there are some type of phenomena that come up which I can easily identify and I'm not attached to. Okay, like for example, a conversation or a song or a visual picture will come up in the river, right? And I can see it come and go, right? I can see it dissolve. I have no issues there. But there's a subjective, you know, all of these 52 factors, right, you know, have subjective aspects to them. I find those much more challenging to pick up. You know, it's just an observation, you know, and so all of the experience, right? I mean, the experience that's unfolding when you've taken when shamatha is set on the mind, right? The experience that is unfolding, some of it you have a sense of detachment to, you know, pictures and songs and visual images, right? But there are other aspects of it where I won't even see. And when I look at that list of 52, I've actually told myself, when I looked at the list for the first time, I said, wow, you know, there's some of these, they just go by and I don't even have a sense of them, like, you know, lightness of body and mind and malleability and, you know, okay, they're words in English, but, you know, to see them unfold, right? I mean, there's so much of the picture that is not clear. I mean, you know, only somebody like the Buddha could have put that list together. But I mean, you know what I've been thinking about, and it's just something that just passes by, is that the degree of clarity that you have, okay, even on a good day, you know, most of the time I have bad days, but even on a good day when I can sit and feel I'm sitting on the side of the river, okay, even on a good day, I don't notice some of the things that are there mentioned on that list.
And your point?
Pardon me?
Your point would be?
I'm just sharing this with you and asking you, is that, I mean, should there be anything more that you should take with it, or you should just let the river go on, you know, and keep it simple, like the Mahamudra teaching says, which has a lot of value. I love that the teaching, and you've always said this, you know, keep it simple, you know. I love that, and even to this day. But I tell you what, it's been very helpful for me, okay, to have a sense of the terrain.
Of the what?
Of
Terrain.
the
terrain.
the terrain, right? I mean,
Terrain.
and not to simply take everything that comes from, that says Mahamudra, to be sacrosanct. You know, I'm not like that, you know. You put the stamp of Mahamudra on it, I'm not going to question it. I just am not like that. I'm not built like that, I will never be like that, 100%. But I still love that teaching. However, there's a lot of value to knowing, hey, there's a lot that you don't even see. So what do you think?
Please speak up too.
I'm not thinking much. I think that it actually, I think you're basically saying, what I hear is my experience, that that the list that you're talking about has been helpful.
Yes, it
And
has been.
I think this is one of the great things about the Dharma in general, and all of the different lineages and the turnings that the Buddha did, different categories of teachings and segments of teaching and all, is not that I don't believe, and I've never read anywhere, that one should necessarily have a relationship with all of it. Is that we are drawn to and find various things to be helpful, and what one person finds is helpful, another person may find actually like obscuring in some way. And it doesn't mean that that person should abandon the other thing, get rid of the obscuring, or do anything there. I think that, you know, when we're all Buddhas, all of that'll be really clear. But in the meantime, we find what we find with the various teachings and practices. And that some things really give us a boost in understanding, and maybe also in the stability of our meditation. And other things have the exact opposite effect. They seem to obscure what we previously clearly understood, and do not help us in settling into any meditation. So that's not a slam on the Buddha. It's just that there's so many teachings that you can't reasonably come to the conclusion that, and I'm not saying that you have, but you cannot reasonably come to the conclusion that one even needs to master all of the teachings or even be interested in them. Like many of them are just, I can say with my own experience, there are teachings and practices that I took the teaching on, I attempted the practice, and some of them I tried for a decade. And in the end, even Kala Rinpoche thought it was interesting that one would spend so much time on something that wasn't bearing any fruit. And that was slightly humorous. Now that may have just been that he found me slightly humorous, but I took it as there's parts of the great breadth of Dharma teachings, and the teachers mixed in with it represent a whole new thing too, because everybody teaches their own flavor of every last thing. I think without any exception, it's not mathematics. In the end, it's experiential. So we each have a different experience of all the pieces of it. But so I hear you saying that one, like the 51 consciousnesses, you find that really useful. And I found it to be somewhat useful, but not very useful. Which again doesn't say anything except about my experience. It's like, I would rather have Marion Barry Pond than any of a number of other things. There's a certain way in which we approach our own spiritual path in that same way. When something sings to us and we feel like, whoa, this is really interesting, that I think that most teachers, I think, would probably, except in unusual circumstances, perhaps regarding a relationship with somebody, most teachers would want to support what someone felt enthusiastic about. Just because they're enthusiastic, not for any other reason, and knowing that, well, if they're enthusiastic, they must have some connection to that, and if they follow that connection, just like all of the pieces of the Dharma, any of them that you follow with enthusiasm and look, they're each going to bear fruit. It also seems clear, we do not require realization of any level in all of the different aspects of the Dharma. I mean, if somebody had said we did, I would have walked a long time ago. Once it became clear about how vast the teachings were, I would have, and if I was convinced that it was true, I would have thought, this is not going to happen at any advantage whatsoever in this lifetime. So I feel personally convinced it's not necessary to have every teaching clear. Maybe more necessary if you're a scholar. But speaking strictly from the standpoint of practice and experience, I think it's clear we don't need every practice in order to, under our belt and really mature with it, in order to have all of the experiences.
But Lama Michael, I mean, if I've seen Niagara Falls, I don't have to go to Africa and see Victoria Falls.
Oh, you do. That's a different thing altogether.
But I have to tell you that there are things that, you just like, I mean, maybe other people are more familiar with this part of the teaching, right? But I mean, it's just something that you realize, you just don't, I mean, your mind doesn't pick up those other frequencies, and those other frequencies are occurring. And they are occurring, and had you known about them, then you would have looked for them. So sometimes at least my mind works like that.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, you are right. I mean, sometimes I just want to throw that whole list away, and I just want to do my simple practice, and I'm happy with it. So it depends, It just depends.
And occasionally, I always recommend you throw it all away.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I think
I know. I know from forever you've been like that, and
you're
I
still
concur.
here. I can't believe it.
What?
And you're still here, you can't believe it.
so this, no, I still believe that, exploring and seeing what else there is, I mean, has actually opened my mind, even more, I think, this year. And I'm very happy for it. Okay, of course, then I'll come back and do exactly what you've taught, but still,
Throw it away. Is that it?
throw away, yes,
Yeah.
that's right, that's right.
There's a kind of, I think there's a kind of freedom in actually just on any given day, just deciding, I don't have to do this. And once again, sitting back and saying, okay, once you say I don't have to do this, and maybe also I'm not going to do it, now you're faced with, okay, so now what do you know? And what are you going to do? And you may come to the place fairly quickly, depending upon your circumstances, that actually, by virtue of pushing the whole antidote to suffering aside, that the suffering became three-dimensional. Like you really had the experience and you really saw it. And one person might say, that's impossible after you've pushed the Dharma aside to discover how much suffering you had. But I think that's a narrow view of the Dharma. You can discover how much suffering you've got without any Dharma at all, and just wonder when you're going to find an antidote. So I don't write off any of it. I think actually I've heard enough from respectable lamas who I respected and great appreciation for, that actually we divide the Dharma up into various categories as we divide 51 consciousnesses up, but these things do not exist like that. Shamatha itself can lead to full enlightenment at any given moment. And one teacher will say, well, shamatha will never lead to that because you need this thing also in order to attain enlightenment. But then when pressed, they'll say, but that thing can arise from shamatha. So you get these interconnected things, and it might just be that I just have never been able to go there. It's kind of like sentient beings. We are encouraged and taught in very clear terms that our love and compassion for sentient beings must be absolutely ubiquitous. Not for some and less for others. And the way that we get there is by seeing, in a certain way, forcing ourselves to hold the view that from the most righteous saint to the worst human being, they're all fully endowed with this potential. There are no exceptions. Now that's a view. There's no way to prove that. So it's an issue of what lens do you look through with your life? And looking at all beings, those that irritate us, those that make us want to spend more time with them, and everything in between. By holding that view and gazing at humans and all sentient beings really through that lens, we come to have a sense of appreciation, not only for them, but also for ourselves. That our own experiences are also part of that expression of the nature of mind, and therefore capable again of complete awakening. I'm drawn to that. Just honestly, like that feels to me like if you hold that view consistently, I'm not sure what insight couldn't arise in the midst of that. And we have hundreds of complicated practices that are renowned for bringing about all sorts of realization. But then there's also that little thing there where somebody is renowned for having attained complete enlightenment in the practice of shamatha. And no one would say that that's all that person knew was shamatha after having attained complete awakening from that practice. We would say the fully enlightened being knows all there is to know about this subject that we're talking about, though they may have never studied it. So that also I find very useful, and I find it as a personal antidote to my inclination, which has never been really big, but from time to time, I get really drawn into a very conceptual analysis of these things, and then I recall, actually, that's not where most of the fruit has come from, for me. Like it always feels like you never know. And that's one of the things about using shamatha as focusing on, the river of consciousness, which is a little bit funny also, I just gotta say. Consciousness is used in many different ways. I mean, it's used in many different ways when we talk about the Dharma, even. Different schools, different times, different centuries and all. The word consciousness, I don't know how many words are there for consciousness. It's gotta be, it's double digits for sure, So that's another issue, is that knowing how much there is there, and in order to conceptually work with it very clearly, we have to be able to make some of those distinctions. Otherwise, the conceptual thing itself is a little bit faulty, and then our contemplation begins to rest on that thing that isn't quite right with our conceptual understanding. So I think no matter how complex our practice is, it's critical to be able, not necessarily to do it for long periods, but able to come back to the most simple practice and engage in it clearly, simply. We understand it. It's not puzzling. We're just clear about it, and we can do it well. And if we find that we can't do it well, and that we're confused by it, then it may not be that helpful to move on to other things until we've got that piece kind of clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm reminded of bird watching.
Of course, Bill.
Of course. You know how thick most bird books are? They're about that thick.
Oh, yeah.
Peterson's Western Birds, hundreds and hundreds of down California, we got this in Stinson Beach. We got this wonderful laminated card. It's just two sides, and there are 30 shorebirds on it. It's like, okay. I can, yeah, that's a curlew. Okay, yeah, it's like, is it a that or a that? Okay, I can see it. It was simple enough, and those were the birds that were there. And the rest of the ones in Peterson's, yeah, I might find something that's kind of rare, obscure, that I might not actually even be able to tell the difference between something in the, or I could study ornithology completely and really go into it. But sometimes you just have to go back and forth with the thing that's actually, what's appropriate for what you're doing, and be able to shift back and forth and use the resources. I was thinking, there are 51 mental factors?
Depends on which
Okay.
tradition.
Yeah.
Well, the 52nd is holding up the list of 51 to look for the what's on the list. So that's
Where does back and forth fit in there?
that's 53.
It's in a footnote, it's in a footnote.
So I can relate to the piece of it where you said it's helpful to have something pointed out so you can look more clearly.
Yeah.
That
that's
to
it.
me, that principle.
That's it.
That principle applies throughout all of the Dharma. If something can be held up so that you can look more clearly,
Right.
you have something that's really precious.
Yeah.
But then if you get down to like, but there are 53 are in here, and
I
I've only
agree.
found 12.
I agree fully. Yeah. Yeah.
That's that's like, well, I should have studied ornithology.
Yeah, yeah, but and just to add to that, I mean, sometimes you're not even as settled that you are sitting on the side of the river. Most of the time, you're in the river. So I mean, the days on which you can sit on the side and watch it. I mean, just there's just happiness in just watching it. Let alone how much you can look for,
and yet I wanna capture something that your enthusiasm and joy while you're looking at those mental factors, you're studying it, not on the question, but when you're studying it, that's important. You're leading yourself. We lead ourselves. And when that joy just rises, to me, it's so precious. And it's fine, don't judge it, don't like, well, everyone should study this. I mean, these are things I can do with it. I'll go pitch it to everyone, they all need to study it. If they haven't studied this, they're not getting it, or I'm wrong for liking this so much. And I wanna, don't go there with it, just enjoy it, cause something is speaking to you. And I just wanna share, I had the exact mirror experience of you not starting out with shamatha, starting out with lots of study in the Gelug tradition, years, and the 54 mental factors by Geshe Rabten, and to memorize them, to what are the 5 ever-present mental factors, the ones that are always there. You know, it's very quite good to know them. I can only remember 3, but they aren't the experience of those mental factors. But more, I just wanted to share that after 15 years of following my root guru, Thupten Chudron, and learning so much and being so happy, one day sitting in another class on another classical text, and maybe the 7th one, you know, and suddenly just going, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what I have to do, but it's not this. And it was so strong, it was like scary to me. Like, whoa, you know, what's that? And then the opportunity of the 1-year retreat at SCOL came up very shortly after, and everything in me just went, yes, like boom. And I was afraid to go talk with my teacher about, I'm gonna leave the monastery, I'm gonna do this retreat, can I have your blessing? And she did just what Lama Michael said. She immediately said, I see your Dharma joy, you must do this. Which, you know, was not the easiest path, because I had been a very close student of hers for a long time. So it's just, you know, it can come any which way, but to follow that, let it be, you know,
Thank
let
you.
it be there. Yeah.
Thank you, that helps.
Perfectly wonderful, and it'll wear out too.
Yeah.
And then it's very good to have a simple thing to come back,
Yes, it will.
the so-called
certainly
simple
wear
thing,
out, I agree.
which is not very simple.
That joy and enthusiasm, and wherever we find that in the Dharma, it's extremely precious. And the enthusiasm that you had for all those years up until the moment
Study.
that it snapped would not have produced the shift and the openness.
Yeah,
The whole thing comes together.
Yeah.
So
it was all the
the
ground.
whole thing comes together.
Great.
Would the practice that we're doing today be one that we could do as a curing practice, just like one breath shamatha, or we're just sitting somewhere and just looking, kind of pay attention?
Yeah, you could use what we did today as a carrying practice. That's likely to be difficult in this sense that in comparison to one breath shamatha, when you do one breath shamatha, you just put your awareness on the breath for the duration of the breath. So it's a short, easy practice that we can also feel each time we do it like, I did it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot to be said for, I did it. Because when you do it once, it proves you can do it twice, and so on. You could do it, therefore, you could do it 3 or 4 times. Pretty soon you're confident that you could do it continuously. And you may not get that same kind of immediate feedback from attempting to rest your awareness on the stream on the fly.
Yeah.
On the other hand, put the good side on trying to carry as a carrying practice, is most of us during the day have numerous opportunities to do nothing, to stop what it is we're doing and do something else or do nothing. I mean, you have to go to the bathroom a few times every day, so there's something. And you walk from one place to another. Even if you work in some big company, you still walk down a hall to some other room. Each time that those things happen, there's the possibility of stopping and just watching the mind stream flow, which is like watching the breath, right? It's very similar, except one of them is much more intimate. When we're watching the mind stream, that's like we're right there with the source of our puzzles, with the source of our angst, with the source of our joys. It's like we're like right present with it. It's a more intense practice often than one breath is. So no reason why you couldn't do it. I'm just saying, it's like it may or may not work well.
Okay.
If it works well, why not? It's not like there's a rule against it.
Is there a downside to trying it?
Only if you have an abject aversion to failure. And especially to failure that has no cost. There's so many failures that have no inferred or required cost, and we generate the cost and pay it in terms of beating ourselves up, right?
Yeah.
So if you do that, then you shouldn't do that practice.
Okay.
but if you can just let it go, then no problem with that.
But
So
you,
it's just
Yeah.
it's actually the only, from that you say, the only thing that you need to know is how to launch this.
That's it.
If you
Yeah.
know how to launch it,
Yeah.
and you can just, it's like throwing a ball then.
Yeah.
You
You got
throw it,
so maybe you get good at it on the cushion and then, be good at launching it?
You actually don't need to be on a cushion. You could be standing at a window on the 10th floor of a building looking out. And in the moment that you stop, you have an opportunity to see the flow of consciousness. And in that moment, you can intentionally engage in that practice, of course. Or you can intentionally walk up to the window, or you can intentionally, put your back to the window. And if you can launch it, then you have a possibility. You do need to know what to do to launch it, but you did it today so many times.
Actually, I just fell asleep multiple times. So
I've
I
been
was
meaning
trying
to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
but did you launch it
Doesn't
even
matter.
for a moment?
I have no
before-
idea. I was thinking maybe if I just did lots of little times throughout the day, I'd be good.
Yeah, well,
That's still the
that's
same.
the point. That was my point. If you actually know how to just, that's it.
Yeah.
Then we could say the failure comes because it's not sustained forever and ever. Well, you're going to get a pretty small violin from me for complaining about that.
The Cheerios box.
Yeah. But to do it over and over again, and then it actually kind of touches on your question too, because when we do it over and over again in all kinds of different situations, we're more likely to notice different kinds of things. And then if we have this kind of an open-mindedness about it, and some sense of clarity about meeting our experience, just as it is, we go, oh, well, that's, I don't know which one of the 51 it is, but it's one that usually doesn't fly through here very often. Go back to the birds. It's only here for a day in the spring. So I think it's actually an excellent practice to do over and over and over do it on the cushion, we can kind of increase our clarity.
Mhm.
Just that becomes the thing that just kind of will get that kind of the brightness and clarity, and more sensitivity. Mm.
Yeah, I think the idea of repetition is like so critical, like in all of our practices, isn't it? Like you gotta keep doing it, and it's all kind of training. So I think that also gives us an opportunity to revisit that sense of, if I like doing it and I can do it over and over again, then it's going to bear fruit. Just has to. On the other hand, if you struggle with, I don't know why I'm doing it, I hate doing it, you know, it's
So
like my teacher said
confusing.
do it, but I'm not sure I actually like that person, you know, especially. And somehow you gotta fix that. You can't just forever not like it, not get the joy out of it, and continue. That's like a superhuman thing. Can't do it. So the joy is a big deal. That's a source of great diligence. Without the bad side of the diligence, like I do it because I'm supposed to do it. I mean, most of the religious traditions that we know use that approach quite a lot, and Buddhism does too to some degree. But personally, I don't find it useful. In fact, personally, for myself, I find it totally useless. I just can't. Once I get into a funky state about something, and I think I don't see the benefit, and I've been doing it for years. It doesn't take me years before I'm off to see whoever gave me the instruction and say, like, we have to fix this thing. Like, why am I doing this? And sometimes you get a great result from that. Like, oh, I see, you're doing something. This isn't quite right, the way you're doing this. But if you try it this way, see what happens. And then you try it that way, and you think, oh, I see, that's an improvement. Sometimes it's not an improvement. So I'm an advocate of like hammering on it, continuing on. I can't do it. I'm trying. You can't go on what is very close to what we often call blind faith forever. At some point, there has to be. You can work on the basis of faith alone, but there has to be an underpinning of strong confidence. The confidence that I do this for whatever reasons. Other people may say, like, that's irrational, it's no good, but if it works for you and you can do it and you have the confidence, probably it'll bear fruit. If you don't have the confidence and you just hate doing it all the time, there's something not quite right. At some point, you gotta fix that. I remember Lama Tsantsin on our retreat brought this up. And when I first heard it, it didn't sing to me particularly, that without confidence there is no Dharma practice. I remember him saying just that. Without confidence there is no Dharma practice. And so I took that as kind of like a challenge in a certain way. Like, well, okay, I look and I see I have confidence here, I don't have it there. I have it there, I don't have it there. So then you start looking to see, like, what am I confident about? Then you have the content for a conversation. You know, I'm confident about this and this, but this piece like eludes me. I just don't relate to it at all. And then once the instruction given to me was, don't do that piece. It just was such a relief. It's like, you know, suddenly there was joy. But I think that's the relationship with not just our teachers, but also with the teachers who are not our formal teachers, but other people in our spiritual community, to talk with them about it and share those things. Like, it's not like we should talk about all of our things with everybody, but it's good to have a few people that we have connection with that we can talk about things with. And then sometimes one person will be helpful and two people come to a certain point, and sometimes they both come to the place of, I don't get it. Well, now you got two people who can go. That sort of puts the teacher on the spot, which is what maybe you feel afraid to do sometimes. But two people can do it sometimes. Sometimes one person can even lean over and say, it didn't sound to me like they answered the question. I think mostly teachers should be able to handle that. If they can't handle it, there's something a little off. Now there's exceptions to that too. Like you go to somebody like the Dalai Lama or Karmapa or some very highly regarded person. That person may say something that most teachers would not feel like they could say that. But it's helpful in those cases sometimes to take it on anyway, just on the basis of that extraordinary authority. And especially, it's okay to say, if I have problems with this, I can come back and talk to you, right? That's a must. That's a must. So you have a connection, which is pretty much the entire path. Connections between practices, connection between students and teachers, students and students, teachers and teachers, connections like all over the place. We are nothing but, in a certain way, a bundle of connections. When we sit down to meditate and we see the mind stream, whoa, that is like a rushing river. It's all connection. Okay, it's 2:35 or 2:37 or something in that range. So, if there's nothing else, we'll dedicate the merit. Is that good?
By this
Virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
I was listening to all the questions and discussions, thinking in my mind, how would we ask this question, right? How would we ask a question related, based on this, to Rinpoche? So you should also be thinking of how would you boil something down to ask to Rinpoche?
We just email you one.
You can, yeah.
So are all the questions that you got all gonna boil down to one question somehow?
Oh, gosh.
No.
There'll be more opportunity to
That
ask
would be cool if it
questions.
did.
That would
Something
be
I would
completely
be so impressed with myself. Maybe nobody else would be impressed with me.
maybe no one would understand what the heck.
People will be able to ask
Yeah, people will be able
questions
to ask
themselves,
questions
you
themselves.
don't have to send
You might use
Yeah.
all the time on one.
No.
try to get a sense of it.
It's kind of an experiment. We've never done this before this way, but I wanted to try to kind of reach out into the community and sort of intentionally draw people into the discussion and put some energy into it beforehand and really try to encourage us all as a community to kind of collect our energy and see how we can relate to and take advantage of this opportunity.
And connected to that, this next Thursday is the mind training group, where we'll be looking at questions from out of the mind training stuff, so please come.
So I just had a question related to his visit, and that was, will we have an opportunity to give katas, or should we be thinking about that?
I don't know, we just don't have that much time, the way things have worked out, but I'll,
And it's also true that, you know, we're asking offerings or donations to the extent people can make them at the events, including the Q&A. And most of that is going to him as an offering, just so you know. That's, we have a goal of a substantial group offering that we, need to make, want to make, and so,
Maybe
so we'll be kind of doing it that.
but I have that, it's in my mind, I would like to create, this is part of what I, sort of all the different things I would like to create on my list, and one of them is this opportunity, as you said, basically it's the kind of the equivalent of the personal handshake, the kara, the, you know, the sort of one-to-one.
If
Even
there
though
is,
they're-
probably that Monday evening is
Yeah,
most likely.
yeah, most likely in Monday evening,
So, you could have one in your pocket.
yeah.
I have images of Monday evening, this place being so packed, you wouldn't be able to
Yes.
move.
We
We'll,
hope so.
we'll have to kind of crowd surf people up for kata offering.
You never know.
It's
It's Thanksgiving, I mean, you know, it's
That's
hard
true.
to know if,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to.
I think it'll be just right. It'll be full, but not too full. It's always that way. We always have.
It'll work out.
And often they have a lot of patients and wanna connect, so they sit and the line goes by.
Yeah.
Fairly quickly, so it'll work out one way or the other.
Yeah, I think, okay, I'll put it in my mind that Monday is the most likely time for that.
Show up.
Yeah.
That's,
What do we have, 18?
you don't show up, there's no possibility.
Yeah, this is true.
And this Wednesday evening, and for those who generally don't even know this, it's a well-kept secret that the Wednesday following first Sunday during Chenrezig practice, after Chenrezig, we generally have question and answer time. That's more focused on Vajrayana questions and Chenrezig practice in particular. And this Wednesday, we'll be doing the same thing.